Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
today we are going back to Masters of the Universe Revelation. Kevin Smith, we watched him before, we listened to him talk about his love of He-Man, and who didn't love He-Man? I want to tell you who didn't love it.
Kevin Smith.
I assume that since Kevin Smith is in the range of liking stuff by Alan Moore, Vertigo stuff, he's not really that keen on, say, the X Men, the mutant stuff, even though he knows it. He's more in the realm of the British invasion. So when he said in this video that he was a hardcore fan of He Man, he was 10 and he liked He Man and this, that, and the other, I was like, wow, that's a side of Kevin Smith that I didn't know. I'm surprised. Oh, maybe Kevin Smith's a little bit younger than me, so maybe he did come up in there where I was at a stage where I wasn't buying action figures anymore. I did like them. A friend of mine had them. I did, play with him with the action figures, but at that time I was either in junior high, going to high school, and I couldn't really buy action figures anymore. I did buy action figures again when the Batman movie came out and bought some Turtles things, and my brother ranked on me because he said, oh, you just trying to try to have a collectible. You're not like you just try to keep them in the box and all that stuff. Like basically saying how I didn't really care. I was doing it for the
Hell
wrong
yeah.
reason. But and ultimately somehow those things. I had the turtle ones, the original turtle action figures in the box for who knows how long. But I think in my basement, some of my sister's friends or someone kind of siphoned them out of the basement. So they're gone for now, and the Batman too. The Batman action figures too. I had those. I still had those too. But anyway, let's get back. Let's hand over the con to our friend Calvin Ellis. Maybe he wants to say some things about this. I think he kind of boned up on his He-Man knowledge, and I'll try to chime in when I can. So, Cal, the floor. Let me go a little wider. Well, let's keep Kevin Smith up here, and then I'll go wide in a second. Go
Yeah, let's
for it.
keep Kevin Smith right where he is. Let's keep him right where he is. We'll get to him in a second. My history with He-Man actually goes back before the cartoon. A lot of guys are introduced to He-Man with the cartoon, with the Filmation cartoon. And I'm pretty certain you watched a whole bunch of the Filmation stuff growing up. There was like they had a Tarzan series, a Batman series, Zorro, the Lone Ranger. There was Batman in the Super Seven. DC Comics actually sued Filmation at one point for two comic strips. They for two cartoons they had out, Manta and Moray, and Super Stretch and Micro Woman, saying, "No, you're trying to rip off Plastic Man and you're trying to rip off Aquaman." So that a little bit off the beaten trail, but I'm certain most guys around the same age, or if you just like cartoons, you probably stumbled onto those at one point. But
Let me chime in. I will say I was a big fan of their first Batman with the music, killer
mhm,
music. I
yeah,
would say that the true fourth season of Star Trek is the animated Star Trek.
yes,
Gives us the Captain Kirk that's agreeable and working with his crew more than just sort of telling them what to do. Because he really utilizes the crew a lot more, and some of the bits we've seen in some of the later movies. And I
uh-huh.
did watch some He-Man and only maybe the first thing of She-Ra, the first
uh,
episode of She-Ra. So I'll just say that's my chime in. So
just a little bit of background on the Filmation thing. One, I will diverge just a little bit to say that those closing credits for the Batman cartoon, those were ace. That part where he's running to the Batmobile, just leaps in and just drives away. If you've
oh
never
my
seen it, we got to
goodness.
put someone up one of these days. Anyway, but He-Man started well before that because there were these mini comics that came with the toys. And you didn't have to buy one of the toys to necessarily read one of the comics. Sometimes I would just stumble onto one, and you might have went to the store, and the guy was like, "Hey, if you buy some candy, you get a free comic," and so you got to see him that way. But He-Man's official first introduction is in the DC universe with DC Comics Presents 47, and that's a different character. That's a different character than the He-Man who was in the comics before and who we see on TV. In the mini comic, He-Man's just a barbarian. He's just this barbarian. He's big and he's fighting Skeletor. Then we get to the point where we see him in DC Comics Presents, and he has the dual identity with Prince Adam. But you know, the Power Sword were two was one sword split into two, and both guys had one part of it. Battle Cat was able to run at the speed of light. It was just wild when I read this. I was like, okay, this is great. So when the cartoon came out, I'm like, me more of this. I'm gonna make another shift over here because obviously you can't have a battle cat running at the speed of light. It's just not going to work for the cartoon. And on record, I never really liked He-Man the cartoon that much, even though I watched it just about every day because it was on. And my rule was if it's a cartoon, it's a cartoon. It's got to be great. Better than watching any of this adult nonsense. I'd rather watch this stuff. But you would watch it, and it seemed like it went on forever. And they say it was only on for 3 years. I was like, really? That's amazing. Even in
Well,
reruns, it seemed like, huh?
I would say the cartoon 3 years means like 10 years. It felt
Yeah,
like Spider-Man and Amazing Friends was on for like 12 to 20 years.
yeah. People were like, what? You were watching that? You were watching that as a kid? Oh, how old are you? 70? Like, no, reruns, you moron. So that's a whole bunch of the Filmation stuff too, because it was in reruns forever. Anyway, so you come over, and now I can understand what Kevin Smith might be saying. Well, I wasn't a fan of He-Man, but so on and so forth. But Kevin Smith was on record some years ago stating that he was not a fan of He-Man. He says this. He says in the tweet that, hey, I was not a fan of He-Man, but there's some great art over here. And okay, I can understand that. I'm somebody who watched the cartoon just about every day because it was on, and I didn't really care for it that much. Okay. However, there was another cartoon series for He-Man that came out sometime after that, and it's really forgotten. But this was almost like He-Man in space. And I think the less said about that series, the better. A lot of guys, it was totally divergent from what happened. The Sorceress wasn't there anymore. Teela wasn't there anymore. And He-Man was pretty much, let me say, he would have been all but forgotten the way that the original G.I. Joe toys were forgotten. But, there was such a strong fan base, and that He-Man came out in the golden age of animation, that they decided, hey, let's do a new series, and we're going to produce new toys. And that was around 2002. So there was a totally new series that came out, and it went out for it was on for 2 seasons. Okay, it was well done. Story writing was it was good. The first season was okay. Second season was better, is how these shows tend to go. And so now I'm looking at this new series, HeMan Revelation. And they're talking about, they're going to reveal this, but a lot of stuff was already revealed in that series that came in 2002. And I was scratching my head as to, well, why is everybody so ape for this trailer? Only to realize that, most guys probably never saw this series. It was on Cartoon Network on the Toonami hour. You had to have cable at that time. It wasn't like YouTube. You could go watch, you could watch parts of the series on YouTube. You couldn't, there was no subscribe to it. It was either you had cable or you didn't see it. And I'm thinking that even now, a lot of guys probably don't know about it because it's not on Hulu. It's not on HBO Max or Netflix. If you want to find the series, you actually have to go looking for it. And probably the only place you could watch it for free is on YouTube. And you'd have to look for it because I had to look for it to find it myself. So a lot of guys skipped over that. Great. So we get to this new series coming out. And I remember when we saw Kevin Smith, he's selling it hard, like really selling it hard. And he comes out and he says, well, I've always loved He-Man, so on and so forth. And then that's where he gets into a bit of controversy because he's on record stating that, hey, I didn't like He-Man. Now he likes He-Man. I agree with you. Kevin Smith was probably the comic book reader who liked the Alan Moore stuff that disassembled and analyzed superheroes because he probably didn't believe them too much either. There were guys who were, again, they read comics, but they didn't necessarily like, they saw superheroes, they didn't necessarily like them. And then you see something like Miracle Man, and you're like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to take over the world. They got all this power. Pretty much they like the villain. Who would like the villains to be in charge? But the villains were a little bit kinder. And again, that for me is not the big problem. The bigger problem, however, is that like with all of these series, there's a toy line attached to the cartoon. So the toys came out, and there's a synopsis of the series on the, with the toys that came out. And according to the toys, it's stating that Teela is going to be the focus of the show. That at some point, He-Man loses the power. Skeletor gets the power, and that's not so much written, but they put 2 and 2 together when they saw a toy of Skeletor, and he's got the power sword, and he looks like He-Man. So you're like, okay, at some point He-Man's going to lose his power, and they're saying it's up to Teela to make things right and bring things back the way they are. Now, on one hand, I got some lads who whatever, so on and so forth, and then Kevin Smith comes out and he says no, that's not true. That's not what the series is supposed to be. But Kevin Smith, if I'm correct, is executive producing this thing. So how can you have something that gets released? How do you get something that's released that says that? And you're the guy in charge and you're saying, no, that's not what's going to happen. What got released was very specific as to the storyline of the show. And you're saying that that's not the case. So you've already got two right there. You got, well, hey, I love He-Man. No, you didn't. You said right here you didn't. Okay. Hey, this is what the show is about. No, 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 no. That's not what the show is about. It's not that. Like, okay. And then for me, like the third thing, and I'm not doing this in strikes, but if this was strike, this would be strike three. You get a picture of Tila with with all of her friends. Evil Lynn is there, Orko looking like some sort of savage, and I was just looking at the arms, on all of them. Like Evil Lynn has biceps that look like they're about 18, 20 inches. And I'm like, Evil Lynn is a sorceress. Why does she need to be that buff at the end of the day? And then you look at the haircut they gave Tila, and you're like, oh man, they're really gonna do it. It's like they're really gonna do it. They're gonna go that route with this. And I know some guys will just shrug their shoulders because they were never big He-Man fans to begin with. And me, I'm more of a stronger He-Man fan when it comes to reading from the comics, that sort of stuff. However, that second series that came out for He-Man in 2002, I think one of the reasons they didn't go as far as it could have was because a lot of the fans for He-Man, they knew about the toys, but I don't think they ever connected it to the comic. I'm rather to the cartoon at all. I don't think there was a lot of viewership from those traditional fans, even though it was a pretty good series at the all things considered. This one went viral because it connected with those longtime He-Man fans. Okay, that means if you were a kid of 8, or 9 or 10 or what have you, these guys who went 8 for this thing have been fans for He-Man since 1983, 84, 85. That's the reason why it went viral. It didn't go viral because 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds are watching this and saying, oh, wow, it looks cool. I'm not saying that you don't have kids looking at it and saying they're not interested, but it's primarily those long time fans, those guys who have a He-Man collection. They've collected the comics and they have stayed interested in this character all of that time, or were interested when they were kids and came back to it to revisit it and have fond memories of it at the end of the day. This is primarily who you're selling this to. And this is a big deal if you're going to do some bait and switch. If you're going to be doing some bait and switch at today, because that's your core audience. It's one thing if your core audience is a whole new generation and you can sell them a new story, but you're going to try to sell a new story to guys based on the premise of the trailer that pretty much shows a ton of cool scenes with He-Man, and that might be every scene with He-Man that you see right there in the 2 minutes of the trailer. So, I think it's going to be interesting to look at what happens coming down the pike regarding this series, and who knows, the revelation that we may actually get for the series, is that it's a bunch of bait and switch.
Well, I would only add that the problem with turning He-Man into, like, because I mean, I think we said before, like the first thing of She-Ra is He-Man kind of being sapped of his power, and then She-Ra and the team helping out and freeing him, and the two of them together get on a horse, because that's all the Filmation characters always got to do that, and they figure it out. At least in He-Man, everybody gets on a horse together, like they're the NBA players on the banana boat, and they sort of figure this out. The problem with what they're doing is that when I think they're trying to, what Kevin Smith's trying to do is a Transformers thing, but they can't do a Transformers thing because the Transformers movie, the shock of it of what's the name of losing Optimus Prime, and that's the thing that kind of went viral as far as viral goes for the Transformers at the time, that Optimus Prime was going to die, and we're like, no, this can't happen. We know there's times where what's the name Megatron almost killed him, but most of the time he kind of cheats. So this time, is he going to actually win? And this time it feels like if Skeletor has the sword and his chest plate, it's like he's taking everything from him. Where's the is this going to be a total beat down to He-Man? But they're selling it on He-Man, even though it's the Masters of the Universe, the same way the Transformers isn't about Optimus Prime. It's called the Transformers, and they
This is
had
different. It's a little different because Masters of the Universe, I think it's like a working title, so they can trademark this thing. But the show's always been about He-Man, and then okay, he'll meet a master here and there. I do agree what you said. I mean, the whole thing with Transformers, and let's go the full route with it. Where they have that final battle, and Prime buys it. I took my younger brother to see that show. He still won't forgive me to this day for taking him to go see. You took me to go see Optimus Prime die. What kind of brother are you? What did you do?
Dude, I had a friend of mine who I think he moved from Brooklyn before I did. And he was kind of saying his goodbyes, and I knew he saw the Transformers movie. And it felt like every time he came by, I'd ask him to retell me what happened. And then when I finally rented it, and I was it had it, there was no loss. It's like back in the days where you could tell someone a movie and then you still watch it, and if it was good, it would be even better. So
Yeah.
like seeing Prime with the Dinobots and you watching it, knowing what's gonna happen, and say, "Oh yeah, he's not." Even though he killed my guy Ironhide, I really liked Ironhide. It was cool that he's with the Dinobots. It's like, yeah, he got to kick some behind, so he got Dinobots with him, and then when he comes, he's just in the air. He got rockets on his belt, and he just
He
picking them.
wipes he
Bow,
wipes out
bow,
everybody.
bow, bow, bow. It's just like, yeah. It's like yes, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, he got injured, and then of course Hot Rod thinks he can help, and it gives what's the name? But that's the thing that we're kind of looking for because he's our hero. Now the thing about the way the Transformers movie, I mean, it feels like the kids didn't buy into Hot Rod. I did, and I guess I was
No,
on stage.
no, that's exactly that. Hot Rod, it was even on the cartoon. It was like the other characters didn't buy into Hot Rod
Yeah,
being Optimus Prime. We used to say like Grimlock would come along and Optimus Prime would say, Grimlock, I need you to go do this. He me, Grimlock, don't like you, Optimus Prime, but you leader, so me do it. Hot Rod was like, Grimlock, go do this. Go to hell, Hot Rod. Me, Grimlock. It was just like they didn't have it there. And then you showed Optimus Prime, which is pretty much literally at his prime form in the movie, and then you killed him off. And here's the funny thing, because I'm watching the cartoons and I'm just like trying to vibe with it as much as possible. Like, okay, okay. And there was this letter writing campaign from kids, like, when are you bringing them back?
yeah.
And I'm like, where were these kids writing to? I didn't know. I would have written it myself. But eventually they had to bring Optimus Prime back because he was too crucial to the foundation of Transformers. He couldn't be replaced. And we've seen this before with characters like Sherlock Holmes. You try to get rid of him, it's just he's just too much of a fundamental character. You have to bring him back at the end of the day. With it would be very similar with He-Man, as to be quite honest, the whole Masters of the Universe franchise rests on He-Man's shoulders. There is nobody else who can really take over. Okay, and He-Man is a very basic archetypical hero. He's the strong man. He's incredibly strong. He's always going to have. I mean, if you look at most of the series, he would pretty much spend a lot of time lifting up giant boulders and throwing them, taking a sword and cutting everything in half. But there was one episode that actually interested me because he had to throw like an anchor into space. And he was wondering, he was like, I wonder if I'm going to be able to throw it into space, Battle Cat. He swung around, they're playing the music while he's doing it. Hey, man, they're getting some building for it. I was like, well, let's see if he can do it. I'm like, I'm sure he's going to be able to do it at the end of the day. But those were the things that sucked you into the comic. Then, of course, he was sort of like best friends with Man at Arms, and Sheila was the potential love interest, and the mystery of her being the sorceress's daughter and who was the father, which they answered in that 2002 series. But those are all the things these guys are coming back for. Nobody's coming back for the bait and switch. Nobody's coming back to see He-Man get his behind whipped by Skeletor and say, well, this was the battle we never thought would happen. It's like, well, because He-Man has always shown himself to be more than capable of taking on Skeletor at the end of the day. So, to be honest, that second series in 2002, I thought did a good job of making the villains more credible. Because a lot of times in the Filmation cartoons, where the guy would lose, and the next thing you know, he's running through a portal. Next time, He-Man, he's like, oh. It was like, He-Man, you don't got like some rope, grab him by the ankle or something, that
Well,
sort of thing. So they really did a good job of making the villains a lot more credible at the end of the day. But again, I just find that it's just a shaky proposition to go and have a bait and switch with your core audience, and your core audience is expecting to see is expecting to see what you're showing them. So, I mean, I could definitely be wrong. We get there, and it's a really strong series about He-Man, but you got some stuff, you already got some stuff out here in the ether that says no, that's not what the case is going to be.
Well, I'm just gonna. I guess my last point on this would be, it's the thing is that it is, and it's the same, similar to the other one, is that to have to do as much as they did with He-Man and do all this marketing and that sort of thing. That's the difference with the Transformers. They didn't. They had Prime in there, and they had the thing that he might die. They gave you that tidbit in there that there was going to be some action, but they gave you all the other characters, making you feel like the Transformers, the whole thing. This thing is He-Man, He-Man, He-Man.
Yes.
So if you want to do Tila, you can do Tila as a show that has Tila running around and say this is that, and He-Man comes, shows up, or you take him, you catch him, he's been captured. They like took half the universe to capture He-Man, and you're on a secret mission to save him, and then the two of them go together, and then next thing you know, at the end, he's like, Tila, you did good. And then he's like, I'm going to keep going on adventures with my new friends and evil, even though you can't go with Evelyn. Like, but that's the Kevin Smith part. It's like, can we have Evelyn going there with us? Like, why? Wouldn't she be happy that what's the name? And that would be the horror of the show, going too heavy with it. Whereas obviously they can't, like with a robot, you can bring back Prime. If they go full on Kevin Smith, it would be like basically Skeletor like stomping. Like Skeletor was not as muscular as he was not a formidable villain. He was almost in the realm of a Starscream with the voice. So
Yeah.
he's not someone that you look at to be like the, hey, I want to go with Chen. He's a total cheater. And that's not saying anything bad. Like, let's stick with the same character instead of saying, you know what, we're making him into like one of those villains in Wildstorm, like that has a cross between Ghost Rider and I don't know, Dark Side. Let's kind of go for that. And it's like I'm not
It's not.
buying into Skeletor being that guy, So
It's not. And it's not who the character's ever been. It's just not who the character's ever been shown to be. Those, again, you got a really hard sell. You got a really hard sell for a show. You got great reaction out of the trailer. I'm definitely gonna watch this. I'm definitely gonna watch the show because for me, I really need to see. I really need to see if this is. I don't know. I've not been here before, where you look at something, you're like, okay, I'm being told one thing, I'm being shown another, and then I'm being told the third thing. So let's see how the whole thing plays out.
all right, so Kevin Smith, you lied to us. That's the end result of the show, is that you lied to us, and you didn't have to. You can say, you know what? Somebody thought it would sell better, and I've been selling myself to Marvel and all these other people doing reviews. So, and I don't want to. I'm going to go even worse. But I mean, it's. I get it. I get it. It couldn't be something where he just said, it was not. I'm coming into it, and I was a casual fan. But as we've been getting back into it, it's really kind of introduced me back to these characters. Remember parts of like, hey, this was something I watched. I watched a lot of He-Man. I know a lot of this stuff, and it's like, you know what? I was a cat, I was proud, nothing you can't say because you're promoting it. I get it. I get that stuff. But it's like you're going on the internet. You can't try to be, because his comment about He-Man is saying, I'm better than He-Man. I was too old. I thought this was garbage. That's why it's, hey, but look at this cool stuff. That's what this tweet is about. There's no way to get back away from that when you're promoting a movie. So it's like ultimately saying, "Hey, I'm involved in this." I've seen some of the shows, and I know it's out there, but everyone, he's going on the George Bush side. Lie, lie, lie. Don't go back. Only the original, the Herbert Walker. He's not he's the Herbert the Poppy George Poppy Bush. He's the one who backtracked, and like, don't be like, I can't. No one wants to backtrack anymore. Sometimes you got to backtrack, and people will understand. He's like, see, he changed his mind. Wow, what's the name said this, and now he changed his mind. People can evolve. The internet loves that. The internet loves that, so he could have gotten away with it. So My saying is just own up to it, man. Just own up to it. You were just like me. You were worse than me because you were like, hey, this is trash. I admitted playing with the action figures and I was too old to. So, any last words from you, Cal?
I'm all for die with the lie, but in this case, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yes. All right. Spin a rack.
Out.
Latest.